Namaskar. Hello and welcome to P Guru's channel. I'm your host Shri Iyer. Joining me today is Utsav Chakrabarti of HinduAction and a new guest. And the new guest is Hoon Kim. He is a strategic analyst with focus on interfaith relations. So let's welcome the guest of the day as we discuss a congressional briefing that took place on the 23rd of October. Let's welcome our guests, Utsav and Hoon. Namaskar, how are you?
Namaskar, glad to be back. Thank you, Shri.
Thank you.
Sehun, you're coming on our channel for the first time. Welcome, sir. And I've heard a lot of good things about you. And I'm sure you're going to bring a new perspective to this whole dialogue. Viewers, I just want to set the stage here. What is a congressional briefing? And Utsav, you can touch upon what exactly is a congressional briefing, who is it open for, who can participate, and then we can go into the specific issues that have been dealt with this unique congressional briefing that took place on the 23rd October. Over to you.
Thank you, Shri. So the congressional briefing is basically an effort where members of the Congress usually book a room and invite either organizations or groups of experts to touch upon one or multiple topics that are relevant for the members of Congress. Now, usually the room has to be booked by the member of Congress, so it is not somebody from outside who can go and do it. And people who come to these kinds of briefings are either members of Congress themselves who want to know more about certain issues from experts, or their staffers. Often it has been their foreign policy staffers, their depending on what the topic is, their security experts. They would come, listen to the briefing, gather their notes, hopefully make up new opinions or firm up their older opinions. So this is basically an educational effort that is always open to all members of Congress. And people from the audience also could be from the public, because many times speakers who are speaking there bring about victims who they thought, if it's a human rights related issue, or witnesses. So this is one step below a formal hearing. Hearings happen when Congress members officially want to put something on record, but briefings are more about informal, knowledge-based, fact-based sharing of information with members of Congress and staff.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I thought
No. That was it.
Thank you so much, Utsav. Sehun, thanks for coming on our channel. Thanks for the gift of your time. Most important thing that I see about this particular congressional briefing that you and Utsav put together is that it was not only Hindus and Jews that have already expressed their strong support with Israel, but there were many people from multiple faiths and communities who took part in this event. And talk us through a little bit about how you went about planning this with Utsav, and then we'll jump into actual specifics, the vision, what is going to happen in the days and weeks to come.
Well, okay. Well, thank you so much for this opportunity. I think it needs to be said that this effort has been building up for the last year or so. After I met Utsav last year in Washington, D.C. And when we met together, we immediately started talking about the ways where we can work together and coordinate with like-minded allies who really, there's a lot more than people realize. And as we've discovered, there really were. And these folks were people who were not only aware of the issue, but also were fellow victims of the system that we're fighting against. And so I think it was featured on this show a few months ago where we actually gathered at a Korean community center in Virginia, where Shia Muslims, particularly from the Hazara community and the Hindu community, got together and made an alliance, made a pact that really wasn't there before, at least on a community level here like this. And so I think when we've heard the tragic attack by Hamas in Israel, all these communities immediately got together and said, look, what can we do together? And the beauty of it is that it wasn't done on an organizational level or an institutional level. People actually just got together as people and said, we need to do something about this. The immediate response, I guess, from the Hazaras was that, look, we can't, it's obvious also that they can't publicly show support either for the Palestinian side or the Israeli side. And I don't mean the governmental or the political side, or just in terms of the people, because many of them also live under a system where it's extremely oppressive, the Iranian regime or the Taliban. So you never know what they're going to do to them. But in principle, the beauty of the Hazara community in this sense was that they said, at the end of the day, we're also victims of terrorism, and we've lived through it for centuries. But despite that, under our care, Hindus, the Jews, Sikhs, Jains, Buddhists, Christians, Sunnis in the Shia majority area were able to survive. And so we want to live that out. We want to live that spirit out here in the U.S. And so they got together and said, look, at the end of the day, we are going to stand for all the victims on both sides, whether there's Israelis or Palestinians. And so I guess it's fair to say that all of us were united in that one sense of this common belief and shared experiences that really helped them to understand the plight of the people here instead of just hearing it from the news. And so that's something that I think will continue on, and we're looking forward to further collaborating more with HinduAction and also other like-minded folks out there.
Thank you so much, Sehun. And viewers, we have put together a compilation of videos that we are going to give a link to in the description section that you can go and watch as various speakers came and expressed their thoughts at this event. I just don't want to, go back and tell us again what happened, because what we are here is to understand where do we go from here. See, the most important thing, Utsav, for me is this was an act of terror. Which part of this don't the people understand? I mean, I'm seeing campus after campus, city after city, people just saying free Palestine. What the heck does free Palestine mean? Free Palestine means all the Israelis have to go and jump into the sea? What nonsense is this? So people are not even understanding what they are protesting for. These are all professional protesters. You have been brought there on some pretext or the other. And if you have, this is the kind of violence that is going to happen on the streets. I mean, where do we go from here? What exactly do you think the civic authority should be doing? I mean, New York seemed overwhelmed. Chicago seemed overwhelmed. In Minnesota, I didn't even see the policemen. I mean, I can go on.
So, Shri, this is the important part that we covered in our briefing, and I think we will put up videos, and you please should put up videos of some of the speakers, especially Congressman Thanedar when he spoke.
Yes.
He was very, and this is one of the reasons why the Israeli embassy actually retweeted him. He was very clear about two things: that Hamas doesn't represent people of that region, neither Jews nor Muslims. Hamas doesn't. In fact, he called the 2 million people in Gaza hostages of Hamas. And that is a very correct description. And number two, Hamas is a terrorist organization. There is no ifs and buts. So when in America, they have campus rallies where they support Hamas and they say that we want Palestine from the river to the sea, essentially what they're saying is they don't want the Jewish people to exist in the Middle East. That is an important point to understand. They are literally talking about the erasure of the Jewish community from the Middle East. And that is the part we highlighted in our briefing. And we had two Jewish speakers who gave really detailed understanding of this issue. The other point I wanted to highlight in this show is that everybody needs to look at who the people are who are in these protests and rallies, because if you look away for a moment against whom they're protesting, you will see that just 6 months ago or 1 year ago, exactly these same leaders and these same people, as in the grassroots activists, were targeting Hindus in different states across America and Canada. And that's why in our briefing, the title was United States and Canada, because even though we don't have any jurisdictions over Canada as people living in America, but the phenomenon is the same on both sides. In fact, it's worse in Canada, as you might have covered in so many of your shows. And that is something I think Sehun can cover more on the analogous nature of those people who target Hindus and Jews, and even Hazaras for that matter, because they are the same people who also support the Taliban and the Lashkar-e-Toiba and the Pakistan apparatus. So that is something we needed to highlight.
Sehun, I think Utsav set you up nicely. Maybe you can talk to us a little bit about all these varying things where it appears like the crowd is the same. The cause seems to change from point to point, time to time. I mean, today we are being bombarded by so much information that we forget what it was that people were fighting for yesterday. So this nonsense has to stop. How do you see this thing ending? For example, I was thrilled to see that the Soros Foundation has frozen their budget, or there is some rethink. There's a reset button that has been pressed. 24 billion funding has been frozen. I heard something to that effect. Is that one of the causes, or is it the cause? How do you see all these things? I mean, how long will this kind of fake narrative keep on going?
Well, firstly, I think there is a type of unity among these groups that we've never seen before. One of the most troubling things that I've seen personally was folks actually holding flags of Hamas and Hezbollah in these protests. And there's also videos emerging where it shocked me to the core, where people were holding the flag of the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, or the Taliban flag, in these protests. And they were saying, we're all united to achieve one goal. And I asked them, what is this one goal that you're talking about? They said, well, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. And I said, what do you mean by that? And one of the protesters, I clearly remember him telling me, I'll leave it up to you, right? And so it got me thinking, well, are we seeing a phenomenon that we haven't seen before? The answer is yes and no. Yes, in the sense that we've never seen this type of rallies where Hamas calls, for example, last Friday, about 2 weeks ago, I think, when Hamas called for a global day of protest, all these people showed up, and it was called by Hamas, right? And that was the shocking part. But the other question that I posed to a lot of these protesters was the fact that, and this was driven from the idea that Hamas and Hezbollah is connected with other malicious groups all over the world. And Utsav mentioned that Lashkar-e-Taiba and some Pakistan terrorist groups and etc. But the other thing is that they always emphasize a Muslim unity, which, okay, wonderful, that's great. But here's the interesting part. Both Hamas and the Palestinian Authority, even recently, praised China on their policies against the Uyghurs. Now, for those who don't know, Uyghurs are being put in concentration camps, families are ripped apart, children are kidnapped, and their organs are being sold to clients from Gulf countries for halal organs, right? And so you would think that all the Muslim countries will be up in arms about this. But recently, Pakistan actually led this effort to praise China on their persecution of the Uyghurs. And so when I brought these questions to some of the protesters, hey, what do you think about Hamas and the PLO and the Palestinian Authority praising one of the worst oppressors of Muslims? I got two type of answers. They said, well, that's different. Or, I kid you not, some of the protesters said, we don't condemn them for that. That's different. Matter of fact, you would also see members of these protesters holding the flag of the People's Republic of China, waving it around and saying, we're all united today. And so I think the more important point to present here is that we're seeing all of the axis of evil in the world gathering together, and really, unfortunately for the Palestinian people, their cause and their whole personhood is being hijacked by these terrorist groups that really don't care about their livelihood at all. And so this is something that needs to be taken seriously. And again, it's no surprise that the Hindu community is being targeted because of this. Because again, a very a very interesting thing to point out is that India apparently is seen by these terrorist groups as that one frontier that they failed to conquer. And the existence of Hindus themselves, along with all the communities that they live with, and again, India never had a history of anti-Semitism, really, right? And really, all the communities are welcome there. Christian communities also thrive there. The Parsis did, Ismailis and Buddhists and what have you. That is one of the things that they it's a huge stick behind their backs, and that's something that they want to immediately annihilate as soon as possible. But what's on their way? Israel and the United States and all the other like-minded nations. And so it's when I saw all of these some of these protesters holding the Taliban flags and the flags of Hamas, I thought it is getting serious. And I think it's if you care about the existence of your community, as particularly if you're from the Jewish or the Hindu community, you really should be worried, especially when this type of movement is expanding across campuses. And so I would even encourage all of the parents who are of Hindu faith to have a talk with your children about safety, and having maybe having a genuine dialogue with those that disagree. But it seems that there is a growing sense of instability in terms of their safety and all across the board. So I'm sad. Yeah.
Thank you, Sehun. And I'm going to ask both of you the same question. Do you see a drop in funding because of what I read about the new Soros, freezing the funding like 24 billion? Most of the offices appear to have been shut down. Do we as viewers need to look into that a little bit more deeply, or is it just a reorganization? Whose money is it in that foundation? A little bit more light on from both of you. First, starting with Utsav.
So, Shri, I think that this is a reorganization effort within the Soros Foundation. This is an effort to transfer the role of leadership from the father to the son and the next generation of leaders. I think there has been money that is moving around. So there are offices being closed. I believe the offices that are being closed are being done for two reasons. One, that their output has not been what has been expected. So money has been poured in, but not the results that were expected were not achieved. And that is true. I mean, Soros, as Elon Musk calls him, the most diabolic force in the world. Not my words, but their foundation has actually been unsuccessful in places that have either very culturally and historically rooted populations, with a civilizational identity, or populations that are economically not vulnerable to, geopolitical forces. So places like that, they did pour in a lot of money to do what they do, and they failed. So they are going to move money out of those places. There are places where they poured in money, especially smaller countries where you can buy out leaderships and you buy out a small group of people, and then they are, that's it. You own the country after that. And then you can literally, zombify the country and get people to do whatever they want to do, or you want to do for that matter, as in the Soros Foundation. So those countries, they're going to transfer their funds into. I will have to warn people of India to be extremely careful, because as late as a couple of weeks ago, there was a hit job on the Adani, industrial complex, and that was purely a Soros effort, as the news media quite clearly pointed out. So India has to be very careful. It's a very critical country, and as Sehun pointed out, that to many people in this world, India is the only civilizational states that stands between a continuous green belt, or the Caliphate belt, going from Bosnia to Borneo and Malaysia and Indonesia. It's literally a belt that is broken by India, and it's a civilizational threat to them. So people need to understand the big picture and look at things in that aspect. I'll have Sehun add more to it.
Yeah, Sehun, over to you.
Well, yeah, and also just to and again with the Soros funding, it's unfortunately it's not my expertise in this regard, but I would refer that to Utsav. But in terms of these organizations working together with terrible entities out there, according to a recent RFA report, North Korean weapons were found among some of the stashes that Hamas had that the IDF actually discovered. North Korean weapons were discovered, and there's actually reports slowly coming out that Hamas and their militants or their affiliates were actually deeply linked with those in power in Beijing. And so we're seeing an axis of evil that's now really doing all their best to carry out this agenda. And let me not leave out Iran, the Iranian regime either. And again, I would say that to me it just looks like another form of a proxy war that Iran themselves are trying to promote in that part of the region. And Hamas and Hezbollah, of course, they're and again, let me just call them for what they are. They're being house dogs of Iran and China in this particular case, and they're trying to create this what their form of a caliphate. That only allows their type of thinking in that region. And even some of the Hazaras, they have openly said that the moment Hamas takes over, it's going to be another Afghanistan as we see today. If you think what the Taliban is doing is bad, wait till Hamas takes over, and it'll be all the way from so-called Palestine to Afghanistan and maybe beyond, where you will see women all veiled forcefully, and girls won't be able to go to school, and men will have children are going to be subjected to a certain type of terrorist mindset. And they said, this has happened before, and if you do not take our warning seriously, this will be the future of that land. And sometime maybe in the near future, it may spread all across the world. And so that's another point of warning that we definitely should be taking seriously as part of the free world. But also, lastly, let me also say this. Pakistan themselves. I remember one of the fans, and I'm sure this isn't shared among all of the Pakistani people, but some of the fans, when they lost cricket to India, they were saying something like, oh well, what's happening to our brothers in Palestine actually saddened us so much that it became a reason for us to lose this match, right? And it's ridiculous, but on a grassroots level, I think the distinction between caring for the people, the Palestinian people, which I think all of us should have, is being hijacked by the support for organizations like Hamas. And again, look, the Palestinian people can live without Hamas and Hezbollah. And that's exactly what they're trying to destroy, is that, look, without us, you cannot live. And it's no surprise that they're being helped by entities like North Korea, which literally says the same thing to their own people, that without the government, you are nothing.
Thank you so much. And it is rumored that the chief terrorist officer, Mohammed Dees, of Hamas, has 2 Chinese wives. I don't know how true this is. Utsav, any idea?
I think Sehun is the expert on the Chinese geopolitical.
Is it true, Sehun?
I don't really have anything to confirm that. But what I will say is that Hamas and the Palestinian Authority are, to me, they're doing the biddings of the Chinese Communist Party anyways. So, on a personal level, they can have as many wives as they want. But on a political level, they seem to be acting literally like house dogs of these powers. So I don't know which makes it worse. I guess being house dogs of a foreign government is the worst part. But if the CCP, and one thing that I will tell you is the CCP is notorious for honey trapping people all over the world. And so if they became, quote unquote, a victim of that, it wouldn't surprise me. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Now, we all know the problem, Islamization of the world. How does one reverse this process? And I just plant one idea, and you guys can tell me if this is workable or not. Rishi Sunak, Macron, and many other leaders have said that marching on the streets for this is illegal. We are going to round you up and we are going to deport you. Is this mere rhetoric, or do you think they're going to do something? Because this is one way to effectively control the crowds. I mean, no amount of police force is going to be able to stop a lakh people, 100,000 people coming and praying in Times Square and jamming up the entire traffic. This is exactly what they want to do, to show strength. But the point I think I'm trying to make is, sure, once or twice you allow that, take detailed videos of who was there, who wasn't there. First, take the low-hanging fruit. Take out all the illegals in every city. Maybe America can place them in Guantanamo Bay. UK has Isle of Man and everything beyond in the North Sea. They can find an island or two to house them. Ireland is a good place. My point I'm trying to make here is, are these people going to follow through with their threats? I haven't seen anything yet on the ground.
So I do not think that they have the political will to fully follow through on any of these, and certainly not France and UK, the two countries you mentioned. Because if you go to UK and if you followed the Leicester riots that was targeted against Hindus in Leicester last year, people like Al-Qaeda supporters and ISIS sympathizers like Majid Freeman openly walked the streets with the police by their side and spread disinformation and incite violence. So as much as Rishi Sunak or Macron or anybody else for that matter in Western leadership are well-intentioned and well-meaning in their effort to try to manage the situation, unfortunately, what I see, especially in Europe, is that Islamists have full control of the narrative. They have sympathizers in the left of center organizations and political parties. They also have managed to find sympathizers in the centrist and the right of center political parties for different reasons. So it's a losing battle, in my understanding, for the state authorities, for the authorities of law and order. And I think this will reveal themselves in much more violent and much more dangerous forms in the years to come, both in UK and France, as well as in Germany and other parts of Western Europe. And I think Sehun can add more to it.
Sehun, go ahead. Yeah.
Well, also, let's remember, at least in the United States, Hamas and Hezbollah are both terrorist organizations. So any sympathies for any terrorist organizations by any individual needs to come into question, right? There is an effort right now in the Senate to deport any visa holders, for example, who have publicly shown support for Hamas or Hezbollah. And again, you can have all types of opinions about this, but at the end of the day, when you are given a visa to the United States and you're showing support for those type of organizations, it is the job of the authorities to at least seek you out and see what you were doing at the very least. But I agree with Utsav in the sense that there is a bit of lack of political will that we see in parts of the West, and I really think that it will become a bit of a challenge. I mean, think about it. Someone like Anjem Chowdhury, for example, who has been notoriously saying things like, oh, we want a full Sharia law in the UK and beyond, and he's publicly supported terrorist groups in the past. But look how many years it took for him to be arrested and be put into prison. And so unfortunately, that really hasn't changed over the years. And I do think that I really do think that it will be a major challenge for us here in the West. And also, I'll also say this, in places like Northeast Asia, for example, I can say South Korea or Japan, they're going to be also facing this situation as well, where when a lot of migrants from the Middle East or even South Asia are coming in, and we're seeing not much, fortunately, but reports where they're targeting Korean or Japanese women, for example, right? And these things are slowly happening over there. And plus, let me also point out that there's a large number of Muslims also out there that are completely against these, and the fact that they were the first ones to be silenced and continue to live in silence is something that we must also take into consideration. I mean, let's not just look at the Hazaras, for example. There are members within the Muslim intellectual community who have been shot down completely over the years, for basically criticizing some certain aspects about these movements, and I think what happened to them is probably is a future that awaits us all if we don't do anything right now, and to point out the individuals that are involved. Again, I must emphasize the fact that we're seeing flags of the Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Taliban in front of the White House flying freely under the pretext of free speech is extremely concerning, and that's something that probably not just the authorities but everyone in the community needs to be aware of, and they need to guard themselves more carefully now in the coming days.
Thank you so much. And viewers, I must also mention that this is not the only thing that was discussed. What's happening in Israel. There were also speakers such as Sundar Iyer. There was also speakers on representing the Meiteis, and also Asra Nomani, journalist and author. So there's a lot of stuff that got exchanged. Utsav, since you and in Sehun organized this, maybe you can talk about a couple of these speakers, and Sehun can fill in the rest. Go ahead first, you.
So I will let Sehun speak about Asra, since he brought the topic of progressive Muslim women and Muslims' voices that are being suppressed. And there is no better example of that than Asra Nomani, and the book she wrote is so we bought 50 copies of Asra's book, Woke America, and we gave it out to all the staffers and all the members of Congress who were there. But I'll let Sehun talk more about the book as well as about Asra. I just wanted to cover two other very critical and important issues that were discussed at the briefing. And the reason they were discussed is because they are connected to what is happening with the events in Israel, as well as with the pro-Hamas rallies in America and the anti-Hindu and anti-Semitism in America. Those two topics we discussed was the Meiteis Manipuri community. And the Meiteis Manipuri community for the first time had a place at a congressional briefing. For the last year, there has been a massive disinformation campaign against this community about an issue that is far more complex than just a religious conflict as it was presented in the Western media and the riots in Manipur. And the Meiteis had such a bad targeting being done against them just because they're a micro-minority ethnic group within the Hindu community that they had no voice. In fact, they were disinvited by Indian American Muslim Council when they did their briefing on Manipur at the US Congress. They were invited, they bought their flight tickets, and then they were disinvited because they were afraid that the truth would come out. And so we made it a point to make sure that our voices were heard and the Meiteis voices were heard. So they gave a very good presentation, and we will put up the Meiteis presentation online, where one thing that they very clearly pointed out was that even though in the beginning, when the riots were happening, it was presented as a conflict between the Christians and the Hindus in Manipur, later on, the entire movement was co-opted by the Islamists. And it was Indian American Muslim Council and Justice for All, an organization that is very pro-Hamas, that took over the issue, started running the game on behalf of the quote-unquote Christian community with hardly any Christian representation. Maybe a few Baptist folks here and there. But the larger Christian community was completely ignored because they were beginning to see the reality of what was happening on the ground in Manipur. So that's why that topic was covered in our briefing, and the Manipuris gave a very beautiful presentation on that issue. Another thing I wanted to also highlight was what the Sundar Iyer, the now exonerated executive of Cisco, who was brutally targeted by the California CRD, Civil Rights Department, and a false case was put up against him for 3 years on the basis of alleged caste discrimination. And so Sundar flew all the way and came and spoke. Unfortunately, the timing was so short with so many issues that he deserved a whole briefing of his own. but we could barely give him 10 minutes of time to speak, not even 10 minutes. And so Sundar Iyer spoke about how the people in California who are targeting him, especially the non-profit organizations like Equality Labs, are also supporters of Hamas and are constantly tweeting away in support of Hamas and the jihadis in different parts of the world. So you see the entire SB 403 case in California, the Meiteis issue, you name it. It has a larger geopolitical connection to the same radicalized groups that are targeting the Jews, that are targeting the Hazaras. It's a common thread. And it really, Sehun pointed this out very well. It really is up to us to find our allies against this common thread that is trying to target us.
Thank you, Utsav. And Sehun, as a fellow Hyderabadi, I have a lot of respect for what Asra does. And talk to us a little bit about progressive Muslims and what kind of a fight they are having to endure. In fact, she's the only one that I have seen who highlights the underlying critical race theory concept, like Linda Sarsour. Nobody else wants to even talk about this lady. I don't know what's so mysterious about Linda Sarsour that I don't even see much mentions here and there. Over to you.
Well, okay. In terms of Linda Sarsour, I think even a lot of her supporters realizes she's becoming extremely irrelevant. She's becoming a bit of an old news in this movement, and so I guess I can see her becoming maybe a consultant for this movement in the future, but really not much else. And so I don't want to give any more of my time and practically my energy talking about someone like that in that sense.
Let's talk about Asra. Yeah.
Right. And in terms of Asra, Miss Asra Nomani, I mean, someone like her and so many others out there, and people really, yes, they're progressive Muslims, but also they're Muslims that are silenced largely by these groups because they dare to bring a simple question right to the movement, and it's simple. They ask these movements the question of why are you doing this, right? And that is a central point that threatens this entire regime, because the moment people ask the question why, it becomes extremely dangerous for any dictatorship to survive. And again, I view this entire movement as one big dictatorship without an actual government. And in fact, I think it's in certain aspects it's worse than Iran or North Korea or even CCP China, because they're spread all over the world, right? And so someone like Asra Nomani is standing her ground. And I guess the fortunate part is that she has educated us and has a great influence here in the US and all. But the unfortunate part is that she has to do with a lot of risk. And folks like her all over the world have to really come out and just risk it all. I mean, even folks like Afghanistan. I mentioned this briefly with Miss Nomani when I met her 2 days ago. It's such an unfortunate part when women from Afghanistan, right, have to come out demanding their place in places like schools or in the government, saying, hey, we have the right to be here. We have the right to educate ourselves. And as Ms. Rahila Kavir, the chairwoman of the World Hazara Council, has said rightly, is that this will be the future if we don't stop it now, right? If we don't at the very least address who the terrorists are. And that's another really particularly interesting thing, is that there's so many people out here in the West that are afraid to call Hamas what it is, a terrorist group, right? And I would really, really highly urge others that it is okay to call them a terrorist group, because that's exactly what they are. I would even go far as to say, as I said before, they're nothing but house dogs of governments like the People's Republic of China. And again, as many other experts have said, they're no different than the current regime in Pakistan, who essentially became a vassal state to China, right? And so, we cannot ignore that part. Let me also touch a little bit upon the Meiteis situation. one of the things that were presented to me when the whole Manipur situation was in the news more vibrantly in the past was that, people have said that the hand of Hindutva is trying to utilize their brothers and sisters of the Meiteis community to wipe out Christianity in the Northeast. Right? They said Christianity is on the decline there. I was confronted very, I was confronted in a very, I don't know, in a very, I would say not in an appropriate way when I asked the simple question, well, do you realize that Mizoram is a Presbyterian state? And they said, oh, well, that's a whole different issue. And the other thing is, the other factor to consider is that, when folks like the Meiteis or the Kukis or the Nagas or the Mizos go out in the streets of Delhi, like let's say 10 years ago, they were called a common word. It was called the word chinky, right? Which is now you can be prosecuted for that, thankfully, in India, right? And so they were hardly being accepted by the greater society over there. And I remember even one of the Indian politicians has said that Tripura is the capital of, I think, Mizoram or something like that. There's a huge lack of knowledge, and for someone to say that somehow the Meiteis are now becoming the hands and the tools of the oppressive Hindutva movement is another ridiculousness of its own. And so the reason why I mentioned this is because there is a growing level of disinformation out there that are, again, going back to moderate Muslims or even progressive Muslims that are targeting them. And I think, from what I can see, is that the first ones who'll be negatively affected by this the most will now be those silenced Muslims, because what they're going to do is that they're going to do everything that they can to guilt trip them, to silence them, or even worse, in worst case scenario, disappear them, which has happened before, right, in other parts of the world, and hopefully not here in the U.S. And so I would even urge your viewers that if you have Muslim friends, and I'm sure you do, who don't stand for these things, I mean, just watch out for them, and just do a safety call once in a while. And the fact that we have gotten to this level in our society here in the United States is not just ridiculous, but it's another reason for all of us to be concerned at the same time. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Sehun. And viewers, for all these things, to get to know the context, like Asra Nomani has been a visitor on our channel. Dr. Enver Toth from Uyghur, who escaped from there, and he's actually driving an Uber car in England now for livelihood. His family is still stuck there. If you listen to his stories, I think it was a 1 hour, 1.5 hours. It is shocking. Numbingly shocking as to what kind of excesses have been committed by the CCP, especially on the Uyghurs and the members of Falun Gong. And the thing here is, IIMC, this group that gets funded, they've created these shadow organizations for every country, which seems to indicate that they are with the country's majority, but they are not. Hindus for Human Rights, they don't represent Hindus. Jewish Voice for Peace, what? These people are so anti-Jewish, and these people are all being funded by the same IIMC with one front person. In fact, it is so convenient in this case. HFHR is the wife and JVP is the husband. I mean, but the thing is, how many of you know this? Viewers, I'm asking you, the viewer, how many of you know all these things? I have been saying from every pulpit. Utsav has been saying it from every pulpit. And what does he get in return? This loudmouth with a loudspeaker comes and blares in his ears, spits at him. I don't want to mention that rascal's name. He should be in jail. But the point is, these are the guys who are getting the narrative. And you find the same rascals everywhere, whether it is Richmond, Virginia, or Richmond, California. I mean, I realize I'm going on a rant here, but what I'm saying is the narrative is stacked against this. Last question for both of you guys. What do we need to do? I mean, I'm doing everything I can. I've got all these outliers in on my channel expressing their views. But beyond that, what else do we need to do? Utsav first and then Sehun.
Thank you, Shri, for being very honest about it and bringing the voice to the people. First thing I would say is that be part of us. If you were at the briefing on the Capitol Hill day before yesterday, you would have seen that this is because of people like you joining us with your energy, with your resources, with your money also. Because if you are part of us and if you join us in this effort, our effort multiplies. When I met Sehun, I was thinking the same way he was thinking, but we did not know how to put our energies together. I introduced Sehun to many other people, including now you as well, Shri. Sehun introduced me to many other people that are part of his networks. So now we have a bigger network. We are able to do events and things together that bring together different communities from across the world that have faced atrocities from the same group of bad apples. And that brings power to us. SB 403, if we had come together earlier, if multiple communities who are victims of these same pan-Islamist groups and Khalistanis had come together and spoken to the Senate leadership in California early on, just when SB 403 was introduced, maybe we would not have to go through this suffering of this whole year of disinformation and slander that ultimately governor had to veto. So it is all about us coming together, empower us to do so. I have to tell you that we had a budget of $3,000 for this briefing. Everybody who came to this briefing paid for their own flight ticket. Hopefully next time we could spend $10,000 on this. So we need your support also. I do this full time. I left everything else to do this. Sehun does this full time. He has many other important things to do this. But so we all need to come together, help us build this together. And if you think that Hamas and Hezbollah and Taliban and the Pakistani ISI and Lashkar-e-Toiba can be together, well, we have to be together. And let's put our resources together.
Thank you, Utsav. Sehun, go ahead. Yeah.
Well, I want to also share this is that Utsav said we join us, right? But also just look at what we did in the past few years. All of our efforts have been done by folks who are part of the grassroots movement. I mean, we're not funded by anybody. We don't have $1 billion. We don't have a $1 million network like the other groups do. But the beauty of it is we have people who come and join for genuine reasons. I mean, for the Hazaras, for example, to come and say, look, we miss living with our Jewish, Hindu, Buddhist, Sikh neighbors, right, whom we share warm relations with, right? And for all that to be taken away after 2021 permanently is a scar that will remain in our hearts forever. And they said the fact that it can start happening here in the U.S., they asked me, okay, where can people like us go? And again, the Bamyan Buddhists, for example, Hazaras were the ones that protected that, and they were mostly Shia Muslims. A group of Shia Muslims and Sunnis protecting a Buddhist statue because of the fact that they realize that this is part of their culture. This is a gift from their ancestors that they must preserve under any circumstances. Is a type of an idea and a heart that I do feel that we must all embrace. And secondly, the other thing that we need to realize is the fact that these groups are here to not serve justice to anybody, like they say. And I have to emphasize, and it's really sad that I need to emphasize this because that's the propaganda that are being put out there. When I see some of these youngsters in these rallies, spitting at the Israeli counter protesters, right, saying, we're going to come get you. You're going to be next. What do you mean by that? What do you mean by you're going to be next, right? But when you talk to some of these youngsters, you realize that a lot of them are either confused or they just don't know the issue at all. And again, these are youngsters that also have great potential for the future. And that's the other sad part is that if a lot of these folks within Gaza or the West Bank, they have good futures of their own that are being hijacked by some of these groups. And I would think that if you really care about these people, right, then it's more of the reason for all of us to unite together to stand against these terrorist groups that are going to end up doing the same thing like the Taliban or even worse. I mean, is that the type of future that we want? Absolutely not. Also, I know some viewers, they may be wondering, okay, what is a Korean American doing here on the show, getting involved in something like this? Well, apart from the fact that Utsav is amazing, and all of the teams that we've been working on, we're working with, they're become a family to me. Firstly, I'd like to also share that on my part, I actually am a descendant of Queen Suriratna, who actually traveled all the way from Ayodhya to Korea 2,000 years ago and married an emperor at the time called King Suro. My clan is one of the last remaining clans of that line, and to me, in a sense, I would say, I do have a bit of Bharat in me, right? So I do have a stake in that regard, and I think in a sense, for all those who are particularly connected to this, and I don't just mean India, really, this whole concept of Bharat together, I think it's more of a reason for all of us to unite together, to preserve the tradition of pluralistic existence that really helped each community to thrive openly. And so that's something to be remembered. And on a really final note, it really, it's critical, because at this point, it's not just about doing the right thing. It's not just about uniting together, because it's just, it's something that we just need to do. It's a matter of survival for all of us. And as long as people remember that in the core part of their heart, I think this movement will not only grow, but we will definitely create significant changes that really hasn't been there before. And so I would urge everybody to remember this. And I know that HinduAction has led the effort on this part, but maybe it could be, I don't know, some other organization doing a congressional briefing where we can also partner together in the future to make it happen. And so, again, the power of the grassroots movement has a great impact, as we have shown you today with all of our limited resources. And I'm really excited also to see this movement grow and to produce all the great potentials that it has from the beginning. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Sehun. We know now a lot more about you, and see, viewers. I don't know what 2 years ago I got this bug. I think it had something to do with COVID. I started watching web series of Korean dramas, and I completely got hooked. Whether it was Chief of Staff or the recent one that was a huge thing about the game. I don't remember the name, but there was another one called Vincenzo. It's a mafia guy, Italian, South Korean. It's a blast. My point is this: when you start watching all these things, we realize how much we all have in common. And essentially, this underlying Hinduism, Sanatana Dharma, Buddhism, these are all, we have so many things in common, yet we probably don't even know this thing. So it's a good thing that all these things are coming together now, and we have this fight ahead of us, and let's put our best foot forward. And gentlemen, I have a couple of questions for you from our viewers. If you don't mind, one question each or two questions each. Let's just take those things and then we can wrap up the show. First question, Shankar wants to know, Sriji, a philosophical question, if you permit. Last 50 years, India, Russia, US, EU, everybody suffered the radicals except China. In fact, there are few even today. What do you attribute this success to? First, Sehun, and then Utsav.
I would say the success is attributed to all of us, because we have allowed a couple of things to happen, even within our markets. Viewers, you need to realize that Chinese companies were the only companies in the U.S. In the U.S. market that does not need to abide by any type of regulation, and that was discovered by some amazing researchers in the coming years, and they've addressed this, and they said, a lot of these companies are linked with the Chinese Communist Party, and they need to be put on an entity list, and some of them were. The other thing to realize is that the CCP's links to the U.S. system is extremely deep, to a point where we've also found out that, I'm sure some of your viewers also have this, if you have a thing called the Thrift Savings Plan, which is a retirement plan that that is given to federal workers, including a large portion of our military, mind you, that money that you put in every single month gets invested into Chinese companies, right, that are linked to the People's Liberation Army and so on and so forth. And so we've been funding their economy to a degree where we can't really do anything anymore. And that's something that needs to be addressed, of course, but also because of the economic ties, China hasn't really been put on this this threshold of accountability. I think the other thing about all this is that we call it the elite capture, right? There's entities within the United States that's been captured not just by the Chinese malign influence, but also the Wahhabi global influence that's been trying to really put their narrative out there. Even just going back to the Hazaras, for example, I mean, I when I talk to former Afghan officials who seem to be very optimistic about the future of the Taliban, they said, you know what, they've taken over the country, let's give them a chance. They will say that this is the Afghan perspective. This is the only perspective that needs to be accepted when a whole genocide is happening in that land. So again, I think it also has to do with the narrative that we unfortunately have come to accept, just by our societal ignorance, which we all share. And I think it's time for us to be educated in that regard. And so I hope that answers your question.
I just wanted to say something to this. I think what Shankar probably also wanted to know is how radicals have not affected China, radical groups have not affected China, like the way they have affected Russia, US, and EU. To respond to that part, I would say that there are two aspects to the reason why China has been able to not be affected by radicals, because more often than not, China is helping them. So like Qatar, you will never see a Qatar Airlines plane being hijacked. Obviously, China will also not suffer that much of a direct jihadi attack, because in many cases they are the ones also promoting them in other parts of the world, or at least facilitating them in other parts of the world. So that would be a short answer to that question. Also, China is extremely authoritarian, so they will treat jihadis in a far worse way than the jihadis are capable of. Whereas in Western societies and in India, the democratic setup of the society, the free, the ability to speak freely, are often misused by jihadist groups and their sympathizers. As you saw in most of our conversation here, we were discussing that phenomenon quite a bit. So that is also one of the reasons why there is a contrast between China and the rest of the world.
It's called the Sino-Wahhabi Alliance.
The Sino-Wahhabi Alliance, yes.
Yeah.
Kesar wants to know, does Israel want Hezbollah and Syria to involve in Hamas endgame, want to do away with once and for all humanity? I'll let Sehun answer this question. The next one, Utsav, you can answer, and then we can wrap it up. Sehun.
I would say it's a profound no, because Hezbollah themselves, and again, many factions within Syria themselves want Israel off the map. And so, Hezbollah and Hamas, again, they serve the same exact masters, Iran, and I would even go as far as to say China. And so I think right now, in terms of Israel, they're looking at a very, very tough battle. A huge iron fist will be applied to both of these organizations and any of their regional sympathizers if found. And so I would say to answer your question, Hezbollah and Hamas are in the same camp. So the answer is no.
Sonal wants to know, why is the Holocaust unimportant to today's youth? Is it getting out of their consciousness? Utsav?
I would say yes. And this is not just true about average Western societies where there was awareness about this before, but this is also true about Jewish youth themselves.
Yes.
What my conversation...
I have personal experience of this. Go ahead.
Yes. No, I have had long conversations, and I'm sure Sehun also had similar experiences with older and Jewish community members, member leaderships, that younger Jewish Americans or Jewish people from Western Europe and other parts of the world, they're losing touch with the gravity of what was the Holocaust. and it is expected. See, when a genocide happens, the generation that suffers the genocide obviously is the biggest victim of it and doesn't forget it. So the first generation of Jews who emigrated from Europe to Israel, they knew what suffering meant at the hands of the Nazis. And actually, to be honest with you, not just the Nazis, but there were societal discriminations being done against them even before Hitler came to power.
Yes,
So they knew that, they felt that. It was they all lost somebody in their family. You fast forward 2 more generations, people don't remember anything about the Holocaust. There are more people nowadays who, or at least 10 years ago, who knew about the Yom Kippur War or the 7-day war, 6-day war. So every generation relates to an event that they or their parents can associate with. So it is natural that 3 generations after Holocaust, people are going to forget about it. And to be honest with you, Sonal, at least they got 3 generations of awareness for this heinous crime. There are Hindus out there who do not even know that 3 million Hindus were killed in Bangladesh in 1971 by the Pakistani army just 2 generations ago, 1.5 generations ago, and they don't even acknowledge it. So, it's a tragedy that keeps on going amongst different communities. But I agree with you, Holocaust is becoming unimportant amongst today's youth, and it's going to keep going down in terms of people's memories.
Can I just touch upon that quickly? In terms so in terms of the Holocaust, the sentiments, of course, it's everybody accepts the fact that it's dangerous. It's bad, but people know the historical aspects of it. But the other aspect that's being forgotten is what really led the Holocaust, right, to be what it is. So the lack of education in that regard is definitely troubling. So.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. It was such an enriching conversation, and I wish more people were there to watch it. But these are these conversations are like wine. They only grow better with age. And viewers, please like this video, like this channel, subscribe to our channel, click on the bell button for notifications. And I'm very sure Utsav, Sehun will be coming back, and we'll be talking more in the days and weeks to come, because this is going to be in the center of many of the political campaigns that are going to play out, not just here, but in United Kingdom, in India, in many countries. They all seem to be going to elections in the next 18 to 24 months. So thanks once again for all your time and effort. And viewers will be back again very soon. Namaskar.